Hello, good afternoon everybody. I'm Simon Nunn, Executive Director for Member Services at the National Housing Federation, and welcome to this session which says, how can you take advantage of strategic partnerships to boost your delivery? We've heard a lot about longer term funding, different ways of working, a sort of transformative change at Homes England. Clearly, we as a sector have been incredibly, have been glad to see that culture change, and we've been asking for a long time for things to be done slightly differently. But the bottom line is, new ways of working have got to deliver the homes that we need and deliver on that ambition that we all have to solve the housing crisis. So in this session, we're going to hear from Jackie Jacobs from Homes England, whose title is General Manager Building Programmes, but basically she runs the strategic partnerships. That's kind of all you need to know. She's been involved in housing investment and regulation for a long time, going back to the days of the Housing Corporation. So it's great to have Jackie here. And we've got two chief executives of housing associations who are going to give their perspectives on their experience of strategic partnerships, and hopefully give some hints and tips as well as the best way to engage with this and boost delivery. So we have Matthew Harrison, who is chief executive of Great Places, where he's been since 1993. And he's led the organisation through award-winning development and was appointed Chief Executive in April 2013. And on my immediate left, we have Mark Henderson, who's Chief Executive of Home Group, with 55,000 homes under management across Scotland and England. And one thing on Mark's biography, you can't see it from here, but there is a picture there of him winning a race on one of Barry Sheen's original motorbikes. He's a petrol head, it says in his bio, and a keen motorbike racer. So without any further ado, Jackie, over to you.
Can I go over to the...
It's up to you.
Okay. I think there's some slides that should be loaded up. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. So, before I go anywhere, I'd just like to say what an incredible day we've had today. I wasn't able to come here this morning, but I think as I've gone around the country talking about strategic partnerships, one of the things I've reflected back to housing associations in the room is just think back to a year ago, 18 months ago, and what a different environment you were all working in. And actually, I think today, with the Prime Minister's announcement around long-term funding certainty, we are seeing sort of what feels like a culmination of a huge amount of work by the sector, by ourselves, and colleagues in the department to kind of take the government a long way in terms of seeing how much this sector has to contribute to overall housing supply and the government's ambitions in terms of getting to the 300,000. So I hope you were all around for the kind of momentous speech this morning, because I wish I could have been here, but as I say, it's sort of, to me, it's a real sort of, it's the end of what has been quite a long period of 18 months of seeing that environment changing and giving you the certainty for business planning and delivery planning, but also I think it's the start as well of a new really engaging relationship between government and the sector. Green button. So just to go through the sort of context, so as I say, we know the government's ambitions is around the 300,000 homes per year by the mid-2020s. I've put 25 there because that seems about the right time to be saying that. And at the moment, housing associations across the sector are delivering around 65,000 homes a year, and that's across a blend of tenures. It's not just the affordable housing. But looking forward and to that mid-20s, what did we need to do as Homes England to work differently and engage with the sector to get to the point where you can be contributing what you usually do, which is a third of the overall supply, which in simple maths comes out at 100,000. So you can see what that step change means in sort of very high-level summary numbers. So we embarked on a project with the NHF and MHCLG working with Savills, we looked to establish and co-design a sort of a framework, a new way forward to get new supply deals with the housing associations, giving us the opportunity to work collaboratively and get an understanding of how housing associations can start to deliver affordable housing at scale, and also what impact that has on the overall supply as well, that sits over and above and is supported by that affordable housing supply. So for us, this was, we started the work back in March. Nick Walkley said to us, go ahead, get going, and just start to get this process underway. And I think it was a real change in our approach. You'll be used to, those of you engaged in the grant programs, an environment where government makes an announcement, we work with government, produce a prospectus, put that out about 9 months, and 12 months later you're probably bidding. This was very, very different. We were working to try and, through the dialogue, to understand what is it that will make a difference about how we use grant in the process of your development programs and your cash flows for affordable housing that would make a difference and mean you can do a step change in supply. It was a very different way of working. It did feel a bit like jumping off a cliff for me, who's worked in the organisation for a long time and used to a way of operating, but it has been a very exciting and informative and a journey of learning for me and I think for the partners, but I won't steal their thunder. So we set off around this with this mandate for engagement, and we engaged with around 90 chief executives through a series of round tables. We were talking about certainty of longer-term grant funding, but we were in a context where the 3 or 4 year funding horizon is what we're working with. But we wanted to get a view on and an argument for and build the case for longer-term what grant certainty could do for delivery plans and business planning for housing associations. So what did we look at particularly, and what did we draw down from those discussions? It was effectively that it would help immensely in terms of business planning and cash flowing the build-out of affordable housing and other housing alongside that, for cash flow to come out in a very different way, for us to pay grant against cash flow in a different way, not sticking to individual milestones, not saying, well, you have to have reached start on site before you can get any money, and the grant has to come in certain tranches. And the big ask for the determination of tenures closer to completion, so that actually, when you're setting out to deliver a program and a scheme, actually determining whether something is a shared ownership product or for rent or indeed for market sale, that there was the flexibility as you come off site that you can actually make that decision much closer to the point where you're engaging with the market. So what did we, after we'd had the round tables, we actually then what we were looking for was, of course, as ever, this is public money, looking for value for money, deliverability. Basically, were we looking at delivery within the current spending review period out to March 21 and a little bit into March 22? A definite step change and increase in current supply. And while we're looking at further ways, we're looking for a 25% increase above current delivery levels, and that's above planned levels. So it applies to the affordable housing and to overall supply. A minimum increase of 1,000 grant-funded affordable homes, because we're looking for efficiencies out of the system and looking at how those partners and the propositions will actually support wider consortia of housing associations, and how the deal would actually build a supply for achieving objectives such as capacity building in the SME sector and off-site manufacturing, because often the ask out there from off-site manufacturers is for a confirmed supply and a throughput of demand for their products. So at the point where we got to the end of the engagement, we had 8 responses identified that we could take forward. Because we were testing the methodology and also developing the framework as we went, we did need to work with a selected group with those who fitted those criteria, and we felt were able to progress at the speed that we needed to go at. So you'll have seen in the press our announcements around the 8 partnerships that we announced. Sovereign and Liberty were a joint collaborative approach. There's a consortium in Matrix and EMH Group, Hive, Great Places, L&Q, Home and Places for People. I have to say that's quite a range of types of organisation, and we did look to make sure that we were quite inclusive and that it wasn't just the very large organisations that we were engaging with at this stage, because we did need to explore what helps in the different sort of medium and larger organisations. And the total commitments, I think as Theresa May mentioned this morning, close to £600 million worth of grants, just over 14,000 additional affordable starts overall. We had 23,500 more or less of overall starts and a blended average grant rate of about 41,000. So what are we doing next? We got to the announcements. We're going to Wave 1A. We've re-engaged with everyone who came forward as part of Wave 1. Wave 2, we've launched on the 10th of September. We've got our expressions of interest in, and work is underway to develop that and develop those proposals. And I'd just say watch this space, further announcements on further engagement to follow. And that applies to the announcements around the $2 billion this morning that was announced, because that is work that will now become another work stream and work in progress for ourselves. So I'm going to ask colleagues on the stand to come forward and so from their perspective,
Matt, do you want to
reflect on what was different for them?
The dilemma for a person of a certain age, whether to wear these glasses or not for this presentation. So I'll start with them and I might take them off, so bear with me. Thanks very much, Jackie, for the introduction there. My first slide, skip over that one there. Very quick one, a bit of context about us as an organisation. Great Places is a developing housing association and an ambitious developing housing association with a long history of being a developer. We're a sole northern organisation, and the map there shows our area of operation and some live sites and some stuff in the pipeline. In the last 10 years, we've developed 6,000 new homes. We're not, as Theresa May said this morning, an acquirer of Section 106 properties. We're a developer by and large, and I reckon about 90% of those 6,000 properties which we've grown by have been developed by the organisation. So for us, the conversation that Jackie described had some real resonance, and for us it kind of topped off what's been an interesting year already in terms of our ambitions to be a developing housing association. In March this year, we tapped an existing bond and raised 150 million quid to spend, so that money's kind of right now burning a bit of a hole in our pocket. In May of this year, the board signed off a new corporate plan, which had some very ambitious targets, the growth target being to develop 8,000 homes in the next 10 years. So that's clearly pretty heavy going, really, when you think we were, our track record is about 600 homes a year. We've committed over the next 10 years to break our record every single year. So to get into a conversation about a strategic partnership for us was fantastic, really, because it allowed us to really think about how we're going to deliver that additional ambition which the board had stated. And through the process, we were able to secure funding for 750 additional homes beyond those which had already been planned. So right now, looking forward, we have got a £400 million programme to commit by about 2024. So we're well on the way to achieving those corporate ambitions as stated in our latest corporate plan. So to be in Wave 1 meant an awful lot to us as an organisation. We were the first sole northern registered provider to issue a bond. We're the only sole northern organisation to have achieved Wave 1 status, which is all great for my ego as a chief executive, as you can imagine, but more importantly, it's changed the conversation in our organisation going forward in a number of areas. So I just wanted to flag up 2 or 3 things which have really changed. And of course, the announcement this morning about 2029 really changes the conversation even more. And between myself and Mark, we were discussing with Jackie earlier how we can put her in a headlock before we leave the stage today and get our contract signed up to 2029. So that's plan A. So a few things to mention in terms of long-term planning for us. As an organisation, we've never really had a land strategy. We tend to buy land and then we develop it. We never hold it. We don't behave strategically at all. And now with those sorts of time horizons, I think with the real opportunity there to start thinking about land in a different way rather than just buying stuff and developing it as fast as you possibly can, that conveyor belt which we've tended to have over the years. I think in terms of our people, again, this could be a game-changing position for our organisation. We've always recruited graduates for our development team. It's always been the way at Great Places. But the trouble is retaining them, and I doubt there's a single development department in the northwest of England which hasn't got at least one Great Places graduate in there who's been through our organisation and left. So in terms of people now, we've got a really compelling offer, I think, in terms of bringing people into the organisation. We're recruiting for graduates again right now, bring them into the organisation and give them a real long-term future within the business where they can see themselves for an awful long time, which is great for us. I'm attacked by a fly here, which is great for us because obviously we can build the skills which we need in the organisation for the long term rather than just this kind of short-term crash-bang wallop, which has been our kind of approach really over many years now. In terms of money, longer-term planning now is obviously great. In terms of treasury strategy, I mentioned the bond. We can really kind of think about how we're going to fund our organisation going forward into the longer term. So real opportunities around there, notwithstanding what might happen in terms of Brexit. In terms of operational advantages, there are some real benefits from the strategic partnership approach for us. Holy Grail has always been mixed tenure, and we've done okay with that. But getting locked into a Homes England product at day one in a scheme is really, really, really unhelpful. And we've been wanting for ages to have the ability to have a bit more flexibility to move things around a bit. And we're hoping that the strategic partnership will allow us to do that and make sure all our sites are mixed tenure and we can respond to the demand which is on the ground, which appears to us as we proceed through the development process. Clearly, in that context, changing market conditions, again, is a real advantage in terms of having a partnership, so you can have a mature conversation about changing circumstances and not stop-start. We can remove the risk of stop-start, and we, as a sector, through these strategic partnerships, can respond to market conditions and keep the development process going and be less afraid of the stop-start nature. We can also start talking about bigger projects as an organisation, and we've tended to do small to medium-sized projects. Doing the bigger things is actually sometimes quite difficult because you don't have a decent time horizon through which you can talk to partner organisations and give them confidence that you're there funded for the longer term. So a real opportunity around bigger projects and better partnerships. And in the few weeks since we've signed our strategic partnership, we have now got 2 MOUs on the table for long-term strategic relationships based on the funding which we've got available through Homes England for this deal. So it's really fantastic and really demonstrating instantly the benefit for us as an organisation. I've put modern methods down there as a bullet too. At last, a time horizon through which we might be able to start to invest properly in modern methods of construction. The sector has been crippled by this kind of inertia and short-termism. These new suppliers, they come and they go. It's very difficult for us to get into any long-term strategic partnerships with suppliers or even consider investing in suppliers directly. Let's get hold of the supply chain. And we're doing quite a bit of work with that, and Mark may cover that as well, because I know Home are doing a lot of work in terms of modern methods. Okay, about done? Yeah. Well, it's not going to shift now anyway. So I was just going to mention one final thing. Oh, there we go. GM. Final bit of the jigsaw going forward around strategic partnerships could be something around devolution. We're heavily involved in Greater Manchester. The Greater Manchester Housing Providers is a very mature, probably one of the more mature relationships and partnerships in a devolutionary context. And moving forward over a 2029 timeframe, there are clearly big opportunities for our organisation, for other organisations working in devolved environments to do things which are really hitting the strategic buttons of the devolved governments. Okay, I think that's about it really, so I'll sign off now. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Mark.
Okay, thank you. My water. First introduction, I joined social housing about 10 years ago, 10 years and 2 weeks actually, count it. But 10 years ago, my first introduction to what it was then, it was with the Housing Corporation, HCA, just going through a rebranding. I got a recorded delivery, brown envelope from the HCA, I think they'd just been called. And in there was this big document of utter gobbledygook. And after reading several pages of unintelligible stuff, I found out that, with great delight, we'd been awarded an amber for our development programme because we had failed to attach, using a staple, the planning permission to the appropriate file, and it was only using a paper clip. That kind of stuff, you've all heard it, and we've all been there before. That's kind of been some of the stuff that we've faced in working together. And I think I've sort of observed a lot of people in HC and Homes England who really want to get stuff done, who genuinely care about this and want to get stuff done. But our organisations, the way we do stuff, get a bit kind of hampered by a bit of process, a bit of red tape, a bit of government, love them that we do, and just stuff that got in the way. So I have to say, I'd like the picture when this first kind of opportunity to join the strategic partners came out, I was pretty sceptical, and I guess quite a lot of people, I'm sure Matt was, and I'm sure probably quite a lot of people in the room still are here. We've all heard fine words with no action from government in the past. But, and I have to say but, from the beginning of our sort of sensible discussions with Homes England, it became pretty clear, this wasn't just the disconnect between chief execs talking bollocks and the rest of the organisation just not following, because we get that happens. I understand that. It was Homes England were genuinely committed to this. It looked different. It sounded different, smelt different, it walked different. It was clearly a different thing and a different kind of environment and a different kind of perspective, program that we're entering into. It wasn't a kind of responding to our perspectives, we're filling lots of forms kind of thing. It was a genuine offer of the freedoms and the flexibilities and what we can do and what we could offer. And for us, it absolutely tested against our strategic objectives as an organisation to build homes and to increase our home building whilst maintaining the level of sustainability and viability for us as an organisation. So it meant, going into this, it meant having to respond really quickly. It was a bit of a million miles an hour at something, which is unusual in working with government, it has to be said. It was working really fast. There were, lots of weekends spent sort of crunching numbers and doing work and responding to questions and stuff like that. And fair enough, it got stuff done, I guess. Sometimes you have to bite your lip at the way government and the government machinery works. But hey-ho, that's the way government and government machinery works. And you just got to get through that kind of stuff to get to the end game, which is about being able to achieve your strategic objectives. So we did, and we've done it, and it was good. And it was about developing a genuine partnership. And I think that means, really it's about both sides being pragmatic and solution-focused, not a kind of a contractual partnership, which isn't really a partnership at all. It's just one tells the other what to do, and the other one tries to satisfy that concern. This was a proper partnership and felt like that. There was flexibility and implicit trust in the discussions and the forming of our bid as we went through that. It was a million miles an hour, but there was a genuine relationship where we could bounce ideas and actually talk about the content of the partnership that we would have. Particularly things and flexibilities about how grant would work, and frankly much more trust than I have seen to date. We were able to respond to new opportunities as time goes on, and I think that's a really exciting bit about what this is. So what we've got, we've got a 4-year partnership, but really the opportunities that we saw in summer 2018 and have signed up to are not the grand sum of what we're going to do together going forwards. For me, the really exciting thing is about what's actually next, and particularly as the Wave 2 partnerships are now being agreed. It's, absolutely about doing more for grant. That's one part of that relationship. As Home Group, we'll deliver an extra 2,300 net additional homes by 2022 through all of that. But we're not going to stand still. That's not going to be the sum total of our ambition. We're going to change the way we do things and explore new ways of working with Homes England as a key partner of that. And for us, that means we can then properly start to address the underlying persistent barriers in increasing the number of additional homes. We can tackle the land questions and rethink the role of Homes England and individual housing associations in acquiring and developing on land. With Homes England, we'll be forming a land acquisition fund where Homes England can actually buy the land. That reduces our capex up front under project. That means that we have less capital exposed during the work in progress during that program. That means we can put our capital to buying bricks and putting them on top of each other, or concrete, or modern methods of construction, but whatever it is, we can put more into our development program simply by having a creative way of looking at land acquisition funds, and it keeps us within our risk envelope as an organisation. We've got Homes England as a cornerstone investment in one of our new development products, Flexi Rents. Look on the internet if you want to have a look at it. But That was fundamentally important. Having that cornerstone investor for organisations like Homes England meant that that then immediately started to attract a lot of other institutional investment who were attracted and given reassurance by Home England being in there as a cornerstone investor. And investing in modern methods of construction and learning and being able to scale up properly, not just within Home Group, but starting to collaborate across the sector to try and generate that demand, try and generate that flow through that will actually create new markets and will actually make those new markets sustainable and not perhaps the sort of whiz-bang and gone stuff that's been in the day. I'm really positive this can really be the start of something new going forwards. We can create, I think, using this kind of grant funding, a new market of volume for modern methods of construction. One caution, and I think we would all share this, is in this as new money comes forward, and I think we all kind of share this, how you do it, I'm not entirely sure, but stopping us all bidding us each other up and talking the price up, I think we all have a responsibility. You know, that's not just Homes England, it's not just government. We all have individually and organisationally responsibilities to not do that. And, you know, we've maybe not been brilliant at that in the past. I think this new era and this new openness will allow us perhaps to be a bit more open as a sector and as a culture to avoid those kind of pitfalls that we've had in the past. But it's new, it's different for us all. We'll be learning as we go through. But I always think it's far better to be on the inside of the tent, working with our partners to actually develop and co-create solutions than simply having something dumped on you and told to get on with it. That may be the way in the past. That has not worked. So I guess what I'd say is, my experience has been a really positive one. I'd say, let's all just get stuck in at the deep end on this, drive it forward, explore those new ways of working, and test those boundaries, because that is the way that we really will transform delivery of affordable housing to the areas and parts of the country and to the people that need that most in the UK.
Right, I've had one question on Slido, which is, Theresa May said that the £2 billion gives housing associations unprecedented certainty for the future. Will housing associations therefore be changing their business plans as a result of the money? Now, I think we've heard a lot from both of you actually about how the strategic partnerships are changing the way in which you business plan and kind of plan for the future. But Jackie, if I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, what do you really think is most significant about the Prime Minister's announcement this morning in terms of potentially changing the way in which housing associations work with you?
So I think it's two sides to that. So one is, you know, in the years that I've worked with large-scale affordable housing programs, what we've never had is a funding horizon that goes out to 10 years. And I think that does set a business planning environment that's very different and a funding certainty that's very different. And 2 billion, one can say, well, compared to the amount we've got in this SR, it's not as much as we've got, but it's a start of a conversation for the spending review. So one is the funding certainty. In my 20 to 30 years of working in this environment, I've never seen that level of certainty, which should set the right business planning environment for the housing associations. I think the other thing that we got from working with the strategic partners and the evidence base that we were pulling together for the framework discussions and grant, what we got was we asked for information over 4 years and the 10, and what you got, and we've got evidence around, was a very compelling business case as to why longer-term certainty gives you a lot more. It isn't. It's not quid pro quo exactly. You get so much more in terms of outputs and affordable housing being built and overall supply over 10 years. So I think that is really ground changing.
Right, thank you. Right, do we have any? We've got a short amount of time for questions. Do we have any questions? We do have a roving microphone. Any questions from? We got a question here at the front. Robert, I know you'll have a question. I was going to pick on you.
It'll be a tricky one. Hi, I'm Matt Campion from Shepherd's Bush Housing. It sounds like strategic partnerships are bringing lots of good benefits to the sector. So why not look at extending those down to other parts of the sector, so that you're not necessarily having to say there's got to be 1,000 more homes. For a smaller organisation, that's not realistic. So maybe look at that by a percentage of stock size or something that makes it more accessible to smaller associations?
That is a sort of a good challenge, and we challenged ourselves in terms of how do we, I mean, these are early engagements, so we did need to have some criteria on which to take things forward. But also, one of the big requirements is asking the respondents, how are you going to work with the sector? Because one of the things we need to get out of all of this is efficient ways of working. We don't want to have a plethora of strategic partnerships, because in terms of governance, we've got a strategic framework board. We're engaging bilaterally across a table about all of the strategic ambitions for housing supply, not just the grant agreement. And so therefore, that is resource intensive. So in some ways, we're passing it over to the larger partners to say, you engage and bring your partners into your tent to actually engage with us.
I'd just say, I think it has to be a mixed economy as well, doesn't it? I think there needs to be work with smaller, medium and large housing associations, but I think one of our responsibilities as the larger associations, we are a repository of some skills, and we want to share that, and we want to partner with our housing associations, to be able to achieve more together. And I think we are moving into a more trusted and open relationship in this sector. I've certainly seen that over the past few years, and the opportunities for genuine collaboration. We're doing stuff on modern methods of construction up in Gateshead, for instance. Loads of people are approaching us about how can we actually work together and learn from that experience rather than trying to reinvent it each and every time when we do these things. Because we have a longer term certainty, it's much easier to engage in that kind of stuff because it's not chasing the numbers to get a number through for the end of next year. You can actually talk about year 2, year 3, year 4, and that's where meaningful relationships and meaningful partnerships bear fruit.
In the Greater Manchester context, which I alluded to earlier, that there are a lot of ambitious housing associations in Greater Manchester, but not that many who are headquartered in GM who could achieve the targets which are going to be set through Homes England. So we've already embarked on a conversation about how we can maybe use our Wave 1 partnership to support them to do more. And picking up on Mark's point, I think one of the developments, one of the areas, isn't it, where we all struggle. We can collaborate on all sorts of things, can housing associations, until we start talking about development. And suddenly the mistrust and all this kind of stuff comes in. So what we've been saying to our potential partners in GM is that it's not about great places. I've got 400 million quid to commit in the next 4 or 5 years. We're not after chasing down anyone else's programmes at all, but we can maybe help them, support them to deliver their ambitions through working with Homes England.
Yeah, and if I could just say in the audience, I can see other partners who are in the first 8 who are actually brought together absolutely from the start, consortia and collaboration, which brings in, if you counted up the number, it's far more than 8 actually who are in this first one.
Thanks. So we've got just 5 minutes left. So we've got a question from Robert at the front. Are there any other questions? Because we can take sort of 3 in a row just for the final piece. So Robert, and then Alistair, we got a question.
Hello, Robert Grundy from Savills. It's really about public land. Is enough public land being brought forward for development? We heard Lord Heseltine saying how departments love to hold on to their land for various reasons, but isn't this the time when it could be brought forward? We've heard about land value capture and the use of CPO powers. I'm thinking about land that government already owns.
Absolutely. And Amy, can we take Alice's question just to finish off?
Hi, Alistair Young from Coastline Housing. We've heard Theresa May and I think Michael Heseltine as well talk very passionately today about the urgency of what we're all trying to achieve here. I guess I'm interested either from Jackie or from the other partners to hear how flexible Homes England are able to be to try and make sure that we are actually pushing as much as we can and that we're not being held back by this set of rules or that set of rules that really are standing in the way of sensible policy delivery.
Okay, so do you want to deal? We've got public land and then we've got, who wants to, do you want to deal with the land issue, Mark?
Okay, yeah, happy to come in. Yes, I think, but we shouldn't lose focus on bringing land together. I think one of the things that we do miss is that kind of almost strategic allocation of land and the identification of land at that kind of macro pan-local authority level. And I think that's a big thing that's missing, and that would start to agglomerate the need of public and private land and bringing that together. But there are people out there who are now starting to do that. Homes for the North is one of those, starting to have a look at how the north of the country works. So I think that's coming. I think bringing public land forward sounds great. It's freaking impossible sometimes, even just within one public body. You know, the NHS, to talk to the NHS would be sort of near miraculously, and it's not through lack of trying or will, it's just that they're bloody complicated organisations and beasts. So I think trying to bring organisations together and bringing that land, I think it was that the NHS Land Disposal Authority are actually in charge of 30% of the NHS disposed land. You know, it's just, we've got some bizarre structures and bizarre ways of doing that. But I think you, at your peril, focus solely on public land. It's not always in the right place for a start, as we know. But also there are sort of bits, there are ransom strips, because people out there are pretty cute. And they see public land and they know there's a strip next to it and you can buy it for £1 an acre. Bang it in, because you never know what's going to happen. So I do think, you know, people like Michael Heseltine are dead right. We need to have properly strong CPO powers. We need to have the resources to be able to carry out CPOs, and I think we need a different way of funding CPOs. I think we need to move away from cash up front to cash on disposal when the land is actually developed and sold, and a means of getting the cash back to the original landowners. Again, to stop that CapEx being tied up. So I think it's on all sorts of levels. Sort out getting the departments together and the public land together, sort out the actual acquisitions of the ransom strips, but start to allocate and understand where we need that land. Otherwise, we end up with things like where I used to work a while ago, Scunthorpe Borough Council, who bought this enormous swathe of land on the south of the Humber and built an enormous motorway through the middle of it, and there's all else there.
Matt, do you have anything else to say?
I was just going to come on the land piece, if you don't mind. I think the sector's got a reputation, hasn't it, for asking for free land as well. And so I think we can use these partnerships to build better relationships with local authorities who are pretty used to us tipping up saying, can we have that and can we have it for nothing, please? So I think there's work to do for us as a sector.
So Jackie, final comments to you.
Okay, so just on the land piece as well, as part of the strategic partnerships, we are having discussions and bringing land colleagues in. So each of our 8 partners will know that that has been a feature. We've got the colleagues around the table, and I'm sure Steve Kinsella, our Group Exec Director for land, would actually have could probably do a whole session on the role of land and all of the ambitions for government. In terms of the answer on the flexibilities, we have had the discussion about what flexibilities will make a difference, and we are pushing to make sure, and we're challenging ourselves about how much are we doing this because it makes us feel comfortable and it's a comfort blanket versus what is it that what are the rules that we need to have in place to make sure that we are accountable for public money, because it's that £600 million worth of government money that Nick Walkley, as our accounting officer, could be called at any point in to account for, and he could take a chief exec along with him in terms of if there was challenge from on the strategic partnerships. We've said all along these guys could be up there with him. So there is a balance between what are the rules that you absolutely need versus giving freedom and flexibility. So government money does mean it does come with some rules, but we have tried to challenge ourselves and put a critical eye on what is it we actually need, what assurance do we need. And the thing is that as the running the programme, a multi-billion-pound programme over 4 years, have to be able to work within the fiscal constraints. But we try as hard as we can with tipping and balancing to make sure that it's as easy as it can be, but it has to be with all that assurance that we have to do around using public money.
Right. And on land, Robert, you will see the Federation, we recognise that land is kind of the last piece in the jigsaw, essentially. And it's an area where there's still work to do with government and release of public land. And you will see us publicly and privately in our lobbying focusing, I think, fundamentally on land issues over the coming months for that. But thank you all very much for your contribution. Could you all join me in thanking our speakers in the usual way? Thank you.